Should the residents have to pick up the flak for it? So pick up wherever you want, the fault, what's caused it, or the outcome. Your thoughts, Aaron?
Well, I'm the left-wing voice on this show this evening, and you're not going to hear any complaints from me with regards to responsibility lying squarely with Labour. In terms of who should pay for it, I mean, I don't really see the alternative because, you know, we had, I think between 2017 and 2020, £535 million was budgeted for with no debt management plan. And so we're talking big sums of money. And it's difficult to see how else you would do it unless, of course, central government says, you know what, we're going to eliminate all of this debt. They're on the hook for a lot of money, and I think they've got liabilities of more than £1 billion out there.
1.6 billion of debt.
Yeah.
Almost 320 million of which has made up negative equity on poor investments. Yeah. The interest rates on some of those payments, obviously now, will be sky high.
Yeah.
What do you think, Mark?
Well, I really feel for the council taxpayers of Croydon because they're the people that are going to suffer either way, because even if they were to get some money from central government to bail them out, they're going to see their services cut back to try and make ends meet. Croydon, like you've already intimated, though, are not going to be the last council finding themselves in this situation. We've had a couple fall over in recent times. Like Croydon, it's because partly because they've invested in property deals just before COVID, just before the crash in terms of retail spaces and shopping centres and so on. They've seen the value of those things crash. They've seen the vacancies in those shopping centres fall. And it's the council taxpayer probably that's going to have to pick up the bill. And I think the onus is on all of us. There are local elections in a lot of the country this May. We've got to look really close at how we vote locally. Sometimes we think it's just the general election that makes a difference, but local councils still are responsible for a lot. Council tax is a big bill wherever you live in the country. So it's important that when people go to vote this May, they look really close at what their councils have done and what the councillors are proposing to do.
Yeah, and I worry, by the way, that this is just going to be the tip of the iceberg because apparently councils, including Northampton, Kent, New Somerset, Slough, apparently they have got huge debts and perhaps struggling to balance their finances. Thurrock Council in Essex, for example, have also issued a Section 114 notice, they called, which essentially means that they're struggling, that they're perhaps going bankrupt. One of the things that troubles me, Aaron, is where is the accountability in all of this? Because I was doing a little bit of digging to see what was going on and who's gone where, and there was a report that was done by an independent local government person. Let me just remind myself his name. Yes, Richard Penn, so the Penn report. Many criticisms that it was basically hidden from public view, that it was all covered up. Some people suggesting that there should have been a criminal investigation to some of the goings-on. The CEO, the outgoing CEO of this council, got a huge payoff, £437,000 payoff, which in my mind, you're congratulating failure, you're high-fiving someone on the way out of creating an absolute mess.
Yeah. Responsibility, obviously, like I said, lies with the local politicians, but also the CEO. I mean, the CEO is meant to be the money person. They're meant to be pushing back on the politicking, quite rightly, because politicians represent the interests of their constituents, saying, this isn't possible. That hasn't happened there. In the particular instance of Croydon, I also want to say, Tony Newman, who was the leader of the council, the Labour leader of the council, he basically created a whole fund, which is about £100 million, potentially buy various property assets, and this was not put through the usual process of scrutiny. So it was just railroaded through by the local Labour Party. Now, Tony Newman, is very close to senior people in the Labour Party, Steve Reid, and Steve Reid, of course, very close ally to Keir Starmer. So there's a double broader context here. The first is, I agree, it's going to happen in many other councils. Secondly, some of the people involved are very close to other politicians who say they're going to reinvigorate national politics. And I haven't seen a single tweet from Steve Reid, who's a Croydon MP, in the last week saying, you know what, I'm really sorry that your council tax is about to go up 15%. He's tweeting about absolutely everything else. And finally, people like him are very happy to criticise politicians they disagree with. Wouldn't it be nice if he apologised for once?
It certainly would. Are you in Croydon, any of you out there, or any of those councils that are currently struggling? There's supposed to be this situation, Mark, where if you want to raise your council tax by more than 5%, you're supposed to have like a referendum on this. But these so-called special circumstances or thereabouts, they're bypassing that and they're just having this enforced on them. Do you think that's right?
Well, there's always going to be a safety valve in there somewhere in special circumstances, but you've hit the nail on the head. Local council taxpayers haven't got a say as to how this money's been spent in the first place, nor have they got a say about how the mess is going to be tidied up. And it says to me two things. One, it's a reminder, council tax is a really unfair tax. It's a really poor way of raising money for councils, and it doesn't even raise enough money for councils. So often they're left trying to raise more money by doing property investments like Croydon did to try and plug the gap. But secondly, it also shows councils should stick to their knitting. They're not meant to be property investors. They should focus on doing the things they're meant to do and doing them really well. That might not be so glamorous, but goodness me, it's important in people's own lives.
Yeah.